Open Door is the podcast multifamily owners, builders, and developers turn to for insights, ideas, and identifying solutions. You don't want to miss the latest episode. Welcome to Open Door by Cox Communities, a show dedicated to bringing you the latest information, hottest trends, and newest technologies for you to consider when making decisions for your multifamily communities. Hi, I'm your host, Valerie Sargent. And today on the show, we're examining the innovative world of smart tech solutions aimed at tackling the persistent challenges of staffing gaps and retention within multifamily communities. As the demand for quality housing continues to rise, multifamily owners and managers face an ever-increasing pressure to efficiently manage their staffing resources while ensuring high retention rates among employees. Fortunately, advancements in smart technology offer a myriad of solutions to help streamline staffing processes, optimize workflows, and create a more engaging work environment for the staff. This is why I'm very happy to say that joining me now to talk about this fascinating topic is Jen Piccotti, president of Swift Bunny, a company that offers a suite of multifamily-specific talent and performance management solutions, and Mathew Koenig, the director of sales strategy and enablement at Cox Communications. Together, they'll help us uncover the transformative impact of AI, IoT, data analytics, and other smart tech innovations in revolutionizing how staffing challenges are approached and overcome in the multifamily industry. So join me now in welcoming Jen and Mathew to Open Door. Welcome, Jen and Mathew. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having us. This is great.
Yeah, fun little fact for our audience. Jen and I are actually in the same area, probably only about 30 minutes apart. And we usually see each other when we are out of town or when we are on programs such as this together.
I know. It's totally true. Nice to see you.
You too. It's good to be together. And we'll have to reschedule our lunch.
I know. Exactly.
Jen, as someone who is involved with the latest multifamily data every day, I'd like to get your thoughts first on the big picture and what some of the most common staffing challenges are that you're seeing across the multifamily industry today.
Well, I mean, it's no surprise. Employee turnover is a consistent problem. It always has been. I think it in some ways it always will be. But some reports right now are saying that turnover is as high as 47% on an annual average. And when it comes to leasing and maintenance, even higher. So we know that it's a consistent problem, but we also know that there are many things that we can influence as employers. And some of the things that we know that are the greatest challenges for employees right now, according to our Swift Bunny 2024 Employee Engagement Risk Report, are things like, take compensation aside. Let's take that off of the table completely. So if we look at the other things, employees are really looking for more communication. They are wanting to hear more from leadership. They're wanting to get faster responses from their coworkers so that when they have a request to finance, it's not taking 3 emails and 2 voicemails later. They need that quick response, but they're also asking for more and better work resources, the things that really help them do their job, and also how to use those tools and resources. They want the training. They want the support to make the most of those tools and resources that are available. Because right now, 1 out of 3 new hires are saying that they don't have enough time. They're not given the time during their workday to complete the training that's being required of them to get the job done.
Well, according to your research, Jen, 24% of rental housing employees do not agree that the work assigned to them can be completed in the time allowed. So how should leaders be thinking about the role that artificial intelligence can play in improving their staffing efficiency?
I think that there's a few factors at play here. First, we've got the fact that teams are responsible for so many moving parts and personalities and the physical asset. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so during the pandemic, as an industry, we really rolled out a lot of pieces of technology to try and make work more doable so that we could just keep the engine running, which is fantastic because we are notoriously as an industry so far behind when it comes to technology. But one of the red flags that we're seeing is that even though a lot of the technology has been rolled out, if we're looking at new hires, for example, they're saying that 30% of them are saying that the training that they are receiving, now remember I said that they're not given time. A lot of them are not given time for training, but when they are getting the training, it's not what they need to actually get their job done. So that, for me, step one is making sure that we define clearly what is it that we want our teams to accomplish, and then looking at our existing tools and our technology, seeing if they're actually helping our teams accomplish what they're being asked to do. So if the tools and technology are in place, we need to see, are they doing what they're intended to be doing? And what's not working about it? Is it the technology itself, or is it the fact that they're not trained on how to use the technology to its greatest potential?
So Jen, did they go into detail as far as like the training that they're getting not being what they actually need? Do you know like what they're getting that they feel is not adequate? Do you know that detail?
Well, what I do know is that we're really good at giving them the training for what not to do. So fair housing and sexual harassment training, we are very good at ensuring that that gets done.
Right.
What we're not as good at, or what we're hearing that we're not as good at, is how do we use the tools and what exactly is expected of them so that they know what to do, not just what not to do, but what to do. And so that's why I say that it's such it's an important thing to understand what is it that we're asking our teams to do. And are we providing the clear training so that they know not only what to do, but how to use the tools that are enabling them to do their work well?
Very important. Thank you. Mathew, how can smart tech solutions contribute to better staffing management in multifamily communities?
Yeah, so first and foremost, seems obvious, but I would just say that the smart tech that you're investing in should not add incremental work to property management and maintenance staff. If smart tech is not designed effectively, it's just going to add another thing that staff has to manage, right? Conversely, if technology is designed effectively, it should optimize or streamline some of the workload that the staff has on their plate. So just a couple of examples of what this can look like. Tasks that have previously required physically walking to units now can be done remotely from a dashboard. So this includes things like adjusting thermostats to manage energy, turning lights on and off in vacant units to make them look occupied. Again, instead of having to physically walk to that unit, now you can do that remotely from the dashboard. I would say another thing that's important is deep integrations with other property tech solutions at properties can greatly reduce the number of applications that staff need to interact with in order to do their job, right? And also give them time back to do things that they need to do, like work with their residents. All right, so when this isn't done well, if applications are not integrated deeply, what this can look like is property staff having to jump back and forth between multiple different applications just to do their job, which takes them away from doing important things like working with their residents. And then last thing I would highlight is smart tech should prioritize activity, right? So what this can look like is providing alerts and daily snapshots that narrow a property manager's focus to things that are important and that they need to take care of at that moment, right? With smart tech, there's so many endpoint devices deployed at a property that are transmitting information. And if there isn't intelligence built into the technology to filter some of that out and only bubble up the things that require attention, it can inundate the staff and take them away from doing things that they need to do.
That totally makes sense. And I think having so many different applications, having to go back and forth with things too, like that can be confusing for the staff and just like not knowing what to use when, kind of like when Jen was saying, if you don't get that training on how to use the tools, it can be very confusing. I would add, from a leasing perspective, though, that even though they're not going to the apartments as often anymore, they still need to make sure that they're walking in to make sure that they don't have dust on the counters and that things are shiny and they look pretty and it smells nice in there. So,
yes, absolutely.
Always thinking about that. What are our first impressions? So, Jen, what impact have virtual assistants or chatbots made in addressing some of these staffing gaps that we've had?
They really do make an impact, because so much of what our community teams are doing is sharing information, answering common questions, conducting repetitive tasks. And so the challenge has always been in our industry that our staff isn't there in the office 24/7. And yet so much of the search, so much of the service, the support that's needed comes in after hours. So people are looking to find out pricing. They're looking for floor plans. They're looking for all those types of information. Now, in the past decade or two, we've relied on our websites to provide some of that basic information and fill that gap. But these chatbots, these virtual assistants are now able to elevate that to a much higher level. So when a prospect is searching for something at 11 p.m. at night and they want to know the price of a 2-bedroom apartment and they want to see the different floor plans and they want to know what the pet rent is or if there's a garage available, those are questions that can be fielded and answered right then, as opposed to an email that may be sent with all those questions and a task that a leasing agent has to follow up on. Now their attention can be shifted more from those repetitive informational tasks to now be more like Mathew was talking about, focusing on the resident, focusing on the prospect when they come in, taking that tour with them, doing those more face-to-face, personalized types of activities. And that really makes a difference to them because it's a boost for employee morale when I can spend my time focusing on the specialized part of the job, the personalized part of the job, and the repetitive stuff is minimized. Doesn't mean they go away completely, but they're minimized. That helps me feel more productive. It makes me feel more productive, efficient, more effective. And that translates into a better customer experience, higher resident retention, and ultimately higher employee retention.
Definitely. I know part of what people love in the leasing business is being able to interact with people and to help them. So they get more of that person-to-person connection. Mathew, what are some key factors that owners and managers should consider when deciding on smart tech investments?
Yeah, so the obvious factors when considering investments in smart tech are obviously the financial considerations. So, increased rent, reducing operating costs, improving your NOI, all with the intent to ensure that there's a return on investment, right? And then there's the focus on the resident experience. So bringing something to the table that can entice residents to live within your community, right? In addition to that, though, it's important to consider the human element. And what I mean by that is the staff expectations or the staff's workload as well. Right. So I would just say there's a few factors that I would highlight that should be considered when evaluating investments in smart tech. And the first one is understanding the needs and the pain points of your staff.
Oh, absolutely.
So that way, when you're evaluating which smart tech to invest in, you're solving pain points versus just creating new ones for the purposes of trying to save a couple bucks, right? And then I would say second thing is, I mentioned this previously, but the level of integrations prospective solutions have with existing property tech that you have deployed at a community.
Right, because that can make all the difference, right? That they're able to retrieve the data that is needed in order to make things more efficient.
That's right, yeah. And if it's not integrated, a lot of times, it results in the multiple application challenge, but it also a lot of times results in duplication of efforts just to do things in multiple platforms, which obviously isn't productive. And then the last thing I would say is just the level of expertise and support that a partner is able to provide. I hear a lot of companies talking about being trusted advisors. And I think a lot of companies fall short in that regard.
How so?
So from my perspective, what's really important when I think of trusted advisors is having somebody that can partner alongside of you to design the right solutions that meet the needs, managing implementations to ensure that those implementations are at a high level and are working as expected. And then Jen spoke to it earlier about training being inadequate. But having a partner that can come alongside of your staff and train them, and not only train them, but provide support in an ongoing fashion post-implementation to ensure that employees are set up for success.
Well, especially because Jen was telling us 47% turnover rate. When you have so many employees turning over, you constantly need to be training them on how things work. And so
Absolutely.
I know that those numbers are high in leasing positions, those frontline positions that are out there actually working with the prospects. So Jen, from your vantage point in the industry, what are some good examples of smart tech solutions that have successfully improved staffing retention in the multifamily industry?
Any tool that reduces those repetitive tasks, like the chatbots that we talked about a little bit earlier, but even things like, smart locks. Think about the reducing just having to rekey an apartment or cut keys. Our big solution several years ago was to teach our leasing teams how to cut keys so that the maintenance staff didn't have to do that additional task. Well, what if no one has to cut keys? What if it's a smart lock and you can just program it very easily and there's not that physical labor that's involved for something like that? Also, it helps with lockouts. Instead of someone having to physically come to the property to unlock a door, you have that access in a smart way. So it reduces those moving parts. Income verification. This is another one that we've seen make real big strides right now because it's automated. It's improving the effectiveness of understanding who are these prospects, who they say they are. Do they have the financial ability to deliver on their promise of paying for this? By taking care of that better on the front end, it saves tons of work on the back end. So for non-payments, for evictions, right now, evictions can take up to 9 months.
Wow.
And so not being able to manage a situation like that for 9 months, losing that income, not being able to turn an apartment. If we can take care of that on the front end and really tighten that up, we're saving a lot of work for the teams on the back end. And this was one that I just learned about yesterday that I thought was fascinating, geofencing. So for a maintenance team member, for example, who's coming in on call, instead of having to make a stop at the leasing office to clock in or whatever, as soon as he enters that geofencing of the community, his app opens up on his phone and enables him to be able to clock in or log the work. So again,
nice.
It's a little thing, but it's one less moving part. It's one less barrier to entry for them to be able to hit the ground running and do the actual work and not just the steps to begin the actual work.
Yeah, that's great. I love that idea. It makes their job simpler. And that's really what it's all about, right? Just like, how do we simplify things?
Yes. Yeah.
Moving on from retention, Jen, are there specific smart tech tools designed to streamline the recruiting process for multifamily owners and managers?
Yes. And I think this is probably where there's been the most adoption for smart technology. So things like gamifying employee referrals and making it fun and making it more immediate gratification from the employee perspective. Skills assessments that are built into the application process so that information is gathered immediately rather than having to have someone manage the process of let's schedule a time for you to take this skills assessment, or let me set up just emailing you so that you can do a skills assessment. All of that is automated into the process. Things like AI powered sourcing tools that are going and looking for passive candidates. All of those things, just gathering information and making it more easy, more accessible, more streamlined, just reducing the keystrokes of someone having to begin a process or continue a process. All of that's making it so much easier to get people in the pipeline for that hiring process.
You know what I've seen though with some of my friends that have applied for positions, sometimes it knocks people out who actually would be a really good fit because you're trying to meet certain parameters and it doesn't take into effect sometimes the job experience that they have as opposed to education that they have desired. And so, do you know, is there any way to solve for that?
I think this is going to be an ongoing trial and error type thing as we learn more about what the problems are, what the barriers are, what the constraints are, and we can begin to expand some of those parameters or maybe narrow them or make them more flexible. I think it's going to become better over time. But I think it's like with anything, you start something, you have the trial and error, you see what works, what doesn't work, and then fix it and go back and let's try again. But I think it's a good path that we're on, and learning about where do we need to make these adjustments within the systems themselves. And how do we ensure, one of the challenges, again, to your point of it's not perfect yet. We're a long way off, but biases that are built into the AI based, because AI is just, it's learning on past test cases. And so those test cases might not be the ideal cases.
Right.
So we've got to learn how to adjust for those and plan for those. So there's some work to be done, but at least we're getting it started.
Well, and like they say with AI, it's all about the information that you're giving it to make decisions. So what we put in, being very specific and really being very detailed with what information it should be looking for. Well, taking that a step further, what about the hiring process? How can AI be leveraged to better onboard new employees? And what can we do with regard to hiring?
I think we're seeing a lot of AI where it comes to, again, repetitive tasks or checklists. So we're seeing a lot more with streamlining the paperwork process, filling out the documents that are required, getting the identification that's required, making sure that the benefits are signed up for and being completed in a streamlined manner. So instead of someone having to follow up consistently with the employee to make sure the paperwork's done, we're seeing it more of a streamlined AI process where they are being walked through an app or an online process so that they're being moved along at their own pace. I even experienced this with my husband, who just started a job several weeks ago. And I was so impressed with how the app that his company is using, it really moved him through the process so he could move at his own pace about how quickly or slowly he was getting that paperwork and those registrations done. And he could sit with me, especially on the benefits side, and we could look at this together and make decisions. And I think that's important because a partner is going to have some input on, yes, we need this kind of coverage. No, we don't need that kind of coverage. So AI helps move you through that process on your own time, when and where and how you want to complete it. I think that's really beneficial. With the onboarding itself, though, all those tasks that need to be completed in the first 90 days, that's something that we are not good at as an industry. I don't know if any industry is really great at this. And this is actually something Swift Bunny is working on, how to automate that process so that the burden is removed and relieved from HR and the hiring supervisor. But the new employee is able to go through and get those tasks completed. Anyone else who needs to be a part of that process, IT, setting up their email address, HR who needs to make sure the benefits are done, they can be a part of the process, but it's automated and it's just pinging people.
The tasks are assigned.
The tasks are assigned and completed, and you don't have to worry about someone monitoring the program step by step, which I think is a huge win.
Right. You have your own hall monitor built into the system.
Correct. Exactly.
Well, Mathew, when it comes to operations and maintenance, what are some ways that IoT devices can be used to enhance efficiency and reduce the need for additional staffing?
Yeah, we've talked about some of these already, but obviously with smart devices installed in each unit, operations and maintenance staff can remotely monitor the health of their properties, right? Versus, like we talked about previously, having to go to each individual unit just to try to catch issues as they're happening. And the other value of that is those same resources will receive alerts that will inform them of potential concerns that they need to go look at, right? So if there's a broken thermostat that needs to be addressed, or if there's a water leak that's potentially causing damages, they'll be alerted of that and can then go address those in a timely fashion. I think there's really a short-term value of that and a long-term value of that. The short-term value of that obviously is the time given back, not having to go to the unit. But I think there's also a longer-term value of that where issues can be caught early and addressed early and mitigated quickly, which obviously should allow for limiting potential damages, especially in like leak events, right?
Yeah. It seems to me that it helps them be more proactive as opposed to reactive in response to some maintenance disaster that could happen.
Absolutely. So that's one thing. And then I would also just echo what Jen was saying around the rekeying costs, right? So obviously with smart locks, there's an ability to reduce or eliminate rekeying costs, driving significant operating costs out of the business and improving that NOI.
How can smart tech solutions contribute to both security and staffing management?
What comes to mind specifically for security is just access management. Access management is key to ensuring that residents and staff both feel a strong sense of security by controlling who has access to the community and having visibility to who's coming and going. So from a staffing management perspective, access management enables the ability to set parameters around who can access certain locations within properties, and then keeps a record of that just to have that traceability, right? The other thing that it allows for is it enables the capability to authorize guest or visitor access to specific locations within the property for specific times. So, if you have somebody visiting an apartment, you can set parameters around when they're able to access that apartment. And if they're within that window, they're able to access. If they're outside of that window, then they wouldn't be able to access.
Yes, even when people are using the access control to allow people to do their self-leasing, like they're showing the apartment to themselves, then a window would be given for them to go and do that.
Absolutely. Yep. Self-guided tour is a very prominent use case with smart technology, as it allows prospective residents to visit properties, look at model units, and determine if they want to lease an apartment without having to necessarily interact with staff. And to the point made earlier, you can set the parameters around when they have access, and outside of that window, they wouldn't be able to access the apartment.
Are there some other innovative ways that you've seen building systems be automated to create a more efficient environment for employees that you can share with us?
Yeah, so I would say an emerging use case is centralized work management. So these capabilities aim to optimize workflows for maintenance staff, automate the status of ticket resolution, and improve communication to the residents, as well as aggregate reporting upward to leadership across all of properties, right? So just an example of how this could be put into action. If an alert pops up for a leak detection in a specific unit, this work management capability could generate a maintenance request in an automated fashion versus having somebody manually seeing the event and generating that work order.
And then in that scenario, would the maintenance person have an app to show that something has been completed? Is that being done as well so that it's automatically followed up on?
Yes. Yeah. So that's the idea between the automation within the work management, is that there's automated tracking of the status of completion. So you're eliminating that need for manual updates within the application to note when you're completing activity, right?
Jen, what might some of the biggest potential challenges of implementing smart tech solutions in multifamily communities be? And what are some best practices for overcoming these challenges?
Well, first, we've got to be very clear about what the smart tech solution is meant to do. Okay. What is it supposed to be accomplishing? And the entire team needs to understand the goal or the KPI that's associated with that, so they understand the what and the why. And they need that training. Here we come back to training again, education, how to use it or how to know when it's working appropriately. So for example, even with chatbots, if you're implementing a chatbot on site, have your leasing team interact with it, ask it the typical questions, ask it any question that they might typically receive when they're on a call or for an email or through a text, and see what the capabilities and the limitations are so that they have an understanding of what it is able to do. What are the strengths? What are the limitations? And then whenever anything new is implemented, give it some time, let it marinate out there, and then come back, whether it's 2 months, 3 months down the road, and ask the question to the staff. How is it working? How is it making your job easier? How is it making your work more effective? Or how is it making life easier for the residents? If your team can't answer that question, or if their response is the opposite of, oh my gosh, it's creating so much more work, then it's time to revisit it. Is it a technology issue? Is it a training issue? Is it both? Is there something else that could be implemented that would do the job better or make some improvements? So those are the things that we have to do. We have to make sure that we're providing not only the right technology to solve the right problem, but also have the support and the training. I love the fact that Mathew said we need the ongoing support as well. It's not just one and done, because we've got that high turnover in many cases, but we have the training and support to utilize the technology to its fullest extent, and you could get the greatest benefit.
Absolutely. Mathew, are there any regulatory considerations or privacy concerns that are associated with the use of smart tech in staffing management?
Yeah, so one that comes up often is door PIN codes. Just given the potential concerns if not managed correctly. And I'm certainly not a lawyer or legal counsel, so it's not my role, obviously, to prescribe policies that need to be put in place to ensure proper usage of PIN codes. However, part of being that trusted advisor that I mentioned earlier is understanding potential concerns and being able to advise on best practices. So in this particular use case, there's a few things that are important. So one is just leveraging technology effectively. So an example of this from a staffing management perspective is rather than using master PIN codes for a property or even physical master keys for that matter, technology enables the ability to randomly generate one-time use PIN codes for maintenance staff and keep a record of which PIN code was used to access and when. So I think that's just a good example of leveraging the power of technology to make sure that this is as secure as possible. And then beyond that, there's property education. So just ensuring staff knows how PIN codes are securely created and the importance of safeguarding those PIN codes, just as you would a physical key. And then lastly, with that property education, enabling the property staff to effectively communicate expectations to residents as to how they should be utilizing and managing and resetting those PIN codes to make sure that they are also safeguarding those.
And Mathew, according to Jen's research, 25% of employees do not agree that they have the resources, tools, or technology to do their jobs well. So what strategies can multifamily owners and managers use to integrate new smart tech solutions with their existing workers and their workflows?
The ability to deeply integrate with existing tools is key to automate and streamline workflows. So adding new smart tech with limited to no integrations is just going to result in a clunky experience and not solve those pain points that you're trying to solve. And I look at it through the lens of, how I use smart tech in my home that I've purchased. And a lot of times I don't fully tap into the capabilities of the devices that I've purchased because I constantly have to jump between multiple applications, right? There's not this single application that pulls it all together in one environment and allows me to control everything in one dashboard, right? So that focus on deeply integrating solutions will help with that adoption. And then again, working with partners that have expertise to truly partner as trusted advisors is critically important. So having sales engineers that can design optimal solutions for each building within a property to ensure that it's going to work as it's intended to work, right? Mm-hmm. Having project managers that can put together implementation plans and take the burden of managing that off of the property staff, right, is critical. And then having dedicated account management support. I've alluded to resources earlier that can help with training and ongoing support. But the account management function for us is that resource that can really stand beside the properties during and after implementation to set the staff up for success.
Well, how can training and upskilling programs complement smart tech solutions to improve staffing retention? How does it help us keep our employees?
Yeah, I mean, I think the punchline is just making sure that the property staff feels supported and they know how to do what they need to do, right? Mm-hmm. So having dedicated resources with that subject matter expertise in the time of change during onboarding and training can really help make sure that the staff does know how to utilize these platforms that you're implementing, right? Which should ultimately increase the adoption of those platforms. And just speaking from experience, in the properties where our account managers have the strongest relationships with the property staff, we absolutely see the highest utilization of the platform and the strongest platform stability, meaning the platform is working as it is expected.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because relationships are everything, especially in the multifamily
absolutely.
industry.
Absolutely. And then I would just note one other thing too.
Sure.
Obviously, the intent would be to limit turnover and retain staff, but obviously that's going to be an ongoing thing. So staff attrition is going to continue to be a real concern. So having effective onboarding documentation and dedicated support is critical to help new resources as they're coming on get up to speed more quickly and feel supported throughout that process.
Most definitely. In addition to streamlining and improving the recruitment and retention of employees, there's also a potential cost savings associated with adopting smart tech solutions and staffing management. So Jen, in the long run, how can adopting these types of solutions we are discussing today impact the bottom line?
Well, anytime you can adopt anything that makes you more efficient, you're going to have cost savings. But I think there's this assumption that a smart technology, well, maybe someday it's going to replace an employee. I don't know that that's necessarily the case, but what we can do is make it more efficient so that we're reducing the volume of tasks that team members are doing, which will save them hours either on a daily basis or a weekly basis. And by freeing them up from those repetitive tasks and some of those other things, we're going to enable them to focus on the things that are truly revenue generating. They're going to provide the great service, whether it's to an existing resident or to a prospective resident. They're going to be able to create great experiences because they personally, as an employee, are having a better experience. So being able to give the team breathing room, giving them the, Mathew had referred to it earlier, helping them feel like they know they know how to do something, giving them that competence, being competent in something will give them confidence in the work that they're doing. And by having that greater confidence, that makes work more fun. And then we're having more fun at work when we're able to do the things that we're really good at, and we're able to really provide a service, an experience, helping people find their new home. That is going to increase retention overall for those employees. And when it comes to employee turnover, we want to reduce that employee turnover because it can be up to 30 to 50% of that employee's salary that you have to spend to get a new one in place. So if we can reduce employee turnover, we're going to reduce those employee turnover costs. And that is a huge benefit to our bottom line.
And I know I like having fun at work, which is why I'm here with both of you.
Same.
Right? So something I wanted to ask both of you about was, what are the emerging trends that you're seeing for the future with regard to tech solutions for staffing challenges? Is there anything we should be expecting down the road? And Jen, I'll start with you.
Well, I think the one that companies are really looking out for are anything having to do with maintenance. Right?
Yeah.
Anything that can help us with the maintenance type things. And I think we'll continue to see some more helpmates, not necessarily resolving the maintenance problem, because you got to be there and you got to do the actual fixing, so we still will need the people, but to anything that's going to streamline their process as far as reporting the issues, troubleshooting the issues, those kinds of things. I think we'll see more and more of that in the future. But I think in the immediate future, we're going to see a higher level of adoption, anything having to do with the recruitment and hiring and the onboarding of both employees, and then the recruitment and onboarding of residents. I think that there's a lot of good things coming our way when it comes to AI and smart tech.
Wonderful. Mathew, what about you?
So I'll give probably the obvious answer, but it's artificial intelligence, right? I always laugh because when there's this new emerging technology, there's all of these extremely futuristic examples of what that technology is going to look like. And ultimately, what ends up happening is there's very practical use cases that are solved with that technology instead of these like majorly futuristic things, right? So with artificial intelligence, and Jen's spoken to this multiple times, there's a lot of opportunity just to reduce the mundane tasks across all of the various workflows that property staff has to manage, right? Which, as we've talked about multiple times, if you automate those mundane, repetitive tasks, you're giving them more time to be visible and out meeting with prospective residents. I do think there is some more futuristic opportunities in terms of like after hours support to make that feel more like a human interaction than you're dealing with a chat bot, which I think will ultimately help with resident satisfaction in those particular use cases. However, it's still yet to be seen how some of that will come to fruition, just given all of the potential legalities and concerns around usage of AI. Right?
Well, to wrap things up here today, I wanted to give each of you a moment to leave the audience with a bit of parting advice. So what is the most important thing you want them to take away from our conversation here today? And Mathew, I'll come back to you first on this one.
So I would just say we've talked a lot about the importance of smart technology to optimize processes, take work off of your property management and your maintenance staff's plate. But I feel that just as important, like we've talked about, is that the human element and having that support throughout the process, having that trusted advisor that can stand next to you all the way through implementation. And Jen, you mentioned it earlier. It's not just to deploy the solution and then leave. It's to stay there and provide that ongoing support to best utilize the investments that you've made and maximize the value of those investments, right? So I would say that relationship and that human connection with that trusted advisor is critically important.
It is very important. And Jen, what's the most important thing you'd like to leave the audience with today?
I think it's just another way of saying what Mathew has said. It's not just investing in the technology itself, but investing in the training and education that's going to ensure that your team members are utilizing that technology to its greatest potential. So if you compare education with the actual efficiencies gained, it's not only going to save those work hours and make your teams more efficient and have them enjoying their time more, it's really, truly going to increase the level of competence, their level of confidence in their work, their ability to do the things that they do best to best serve their residents. And that is ultimately going to increase employee retention and resident retention. So it's all about the money. Bottom line, invest the money. It's going to come back in dividends.
Absolutely, because that retention of both staff and residents is the most important thing for the stability of a community. So thank you both for your time here today. It's been so wonderful spending this time and talking through all of this. And I'm excited for everyone to learn what you have shared. So I appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie. It's a pleasure.
Thanks again to Jen and Mathew for being on the show today and discussing smart tech solutions that address staffing gaps and retention for multifamily communities. And if you enjoyed the show, please remember to rate, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening. I'm Valerie Sargent, and this has been Open Door, brought to you by Cox Communities. We're in the top 1% of business podcasts for a reason. Subscribe now so you never miss a moment.